So welcome everyone, also to those of you who are listening to this online. Since in last session I touched a little bit in the beginning on this idea of being disappointed and how that might lead to renunciation. And so then I got carried away a little bit by different kind of topics. So this time I would like to go again into this idea of being disappointed in a wholesome way, in a way that might benefit us on the long run. And so I'm going to talk about this topic in the context of meditation practice, not in the context of current events, etc. So this is really what happens when you meditate more and more, when you actually deepen your practice and you commit to it and you make it more and more regular, go for longer sessions, aim for experience. One of the core principles of meditation is awareness, becoming aware or awake to what is happening within yourself. So in the beginning stages, that is very difficult because awareness is basically filled with so much content, which is moving at such a rapid pace, captivating our attention continuously. So it's really difficult to separate from that and actually gain a type of overview and really see our mind and our body as what they are. We could say it's because we're really caught up in what appears. We're invested in what appears. I've mentioned that in previous talks. It's this phenomena that you might know from watching a movie. When you're watching a movie, you get kind of pulled into the movie. Right? You all know this kind of experience. When you read a book, you might not watch movies, you might read books. You get pulled in by what you're watching. Even if you're listening to a good friend who tells you an exciting story, then you get pulled in, right? You forget yourself, you forget your position, the position of a listener, an observer, somebody that is aware of content that is presented. But you kind of get sucked into the story, almost like you are the hero of the story. That's why we like reading books and watching movies, and it's kind of like you're pulled into an adventure without really being hurt by it. There's not an actual danger for your life. So you can taste the danger that the hero experiences without really tasting it. In the same way, your mind continuously produces its own kind of movies, its own kind of stories that tell you all about who you are, where you're going, what you should be doing, what you should not be doing. They tell you stories about the world and how it is, about your parents, siblings, friends, enemies. And we get so caught up in those stories that we completely forget that they are stories that we tell ourselves. We completely forget. Instead, these stories, they become so real that we start living them out. We're acting them out. And before you know it, you have a world as we have it right now. Filled with a lot of people, we're doing many different things. They're all living out their mental stories. And those stories are not just popping out of nowhere when you're born. They can be traced back through thousands of generations. You're not living your story. You're living a story of your ancestors, your past. Stories that have been repeating themselves thousands and thousands of times. Mostly stories of pain, seeking relief. That's at the core of all stories. If you look at any kind of good story, it's always a story that builds up tension to a point, and then that tension that has been built is then released in the end. There is a solution, we call that a happy ending. That tension might, for example, manifest in the form of doubt or in the form of fear or looking forward or hope, which is not much different from fear. So the same kind of topic plays out in our minds over and over again. A build-up of tension, a problem, and then the solution to that problem. And that pattern is repeating itself infinitely. There's no end to it. So life, if you really have insight into this, if this really kind of starts to settle in, if the dust in your eyes is clearing up slowly and you start seeing more vividly the truth of your mind, then you will see it is an endless repetition of the same in many different colors. So life, for a person that has that insight, appears very much like being in an empty room, sitting in front of a door, fantasizing about what's behind that door. Ooh, there could be anything, right? There could be the thrill. There could be the amazing thing that you're looking forward to. Your worst fears, or what you're hoping for. And you sit in front of that door and you think, what's behind that door? And you think until you're moved into action. You start acting. You get up, you move to the door, you open it, and you enter another empty room with a chair in the middle of it. So you sit on that chair, and what's in front of you? Another door. And before long you start wondering, what's behind that door? What are my possibilities? What are my potentials? What could I get there? What should I do to get that? I really want to get that. And before you know it, you're standing on your feet walking towards the door. And you open it and you enter another empty room with a chair in the middle of it. And so you come to rest on that chair. And you look around you and you see, wow, it's not really what I thought it was. But there is a door right in front of you. And you start wondering, what's behind that door? I'm sure there is something better behind that door. There must be something better behind that door. Before you know it, you're standing on your 2 feet, walking towards that door, opening it, entering another empty room. How is it that we can do that infinite amounts of times? without waking up. That we are literally going through the same patterns over and over again. The patterns that our parents went through, their parents went through, and their parents went through. Suffering, pain, wishing, hoping for relief, hoping for an end of pain, wishing for happiness, standing up, finding your strength, moving forward, being disappointed again. But before long, we pick ourselves up again. And we get another goal right ahead of us. And we want to move towards it. And we have hope. What is it that pushes us? It's desire. Desire for what? Happiness. And it's fear. Fear of what? Fear of suffering. And we move and move and move and move and never arrive. There is a modern day term for that. The pursuit of happiness. To me, there is nothing more disappointing than an eternal pursuit of happiness. It's always kind of like out of reach. When you enter the next room, there is a smell of it still there. And it's that keeps you going. Because you always smell it. It's just the smell of it. Oh, it could be so nice. But it never really is. But because you've had some nice experiences in your life, a little bit of smell of happiness, it keeps you going. It pulls you. You hope for more. But there never is more than a smell. Some people, they might wake up to that and then they become depressed because they have no alternative. They don't know that they could be happy. They are disappointed in the method. Probably people who are most honest with themselves and the world end up depressed. How could you not be? In my opinion, depression very often is not a malfunction. It's the result of clearly looking at this world. Not with eyes that are used to advertising, photoshopping, glamorous magazines, Instagram and Facebook, but with eyes that look through these masks and through these walls of pretense. How can you not be depressed? Looking at the endless wars over human history, endless wars, endless bloodshed, without it ever ending. People fighting over nothing. Empty ideologies. How is that not depressing? How does that not lead to a malfunction of the human heart? Being confronted with so much darkness. But you could look away, right? You could distract yourself. You could eat. You could watch movies endlessly, like fleeing into a dream world. The internet is fantastic for that. We can escape, run away. We don't have to be with our pain, right? And for some people that works. It's enough. keeps them endlessly entertained. But if someone were to pull the plug, quickly the pain would come out. During the Corona lockdown time, so many people have been locked in their rooms. The suicide rates have gone up massively. So many people started killing themselves. So many more than usual. So many households have become, disturbed and dysfunctional. Divorces, fighting, violence. It all went up. Why? It's all already there. It's in us. We carry it around day in and day out. But we keep ourselves superficially busy to ignore it, not to look at it, not to face it. We are running away from our shadows instead of confronting them, understanding them, and bringing light into them. That running away, that perpetual running away with the prospect of the promised land behind the door, it is disappointing. And in my opinion, hopefully so. It means you're opening your eyes slowly. What am I doing inside of my mind, day in and day out? How about my thoughts? How about my feelings? If I honestly look at them, what is happening there? If I take the time to be with myself, what do I see? And yes, no wonder many people prefer spiritual practices that kind of numb them down, that tell you sweet stories, nice visualizations, all that kind of stuff. It's another escape. It's not really spiritual practice. It's another way of it's another type of lullaby. It sends you into the land of sleeping and dreaming. It doesn't make you awake. A lot of people call themselves woke these days. They are far from woke, from awake. It is hard work to face up with what you want to run away from. Because we have to learn all over from the beginning. We have to learn to love ourselves, to accept ourselves, to leave ourselves be as we are, and to make peace with the way it is, which is quite messy. To stop trying to doctor around and find some solutions and fix everything. First of all, we have to learn to just let things be a little bit. See it clearly as it is. And as you do that more and more, yes, you will end up disappointed if you do it right. Because you will see eventually, wow, there's so many hopes and so many fears and so much disappointment within me. That indeed, that is disappointing. You can see it's completely repeating the same thing over and over again. Now then hopefully you start asking good questions like, can I actually be really happy? Can I be free from that disappointment? Can I be free from that suffering? Is it possible to find happiness? True happiness. Not just the smell of it, but the real deal. Is it really possible? Can you go beyond all suffering? Or is it just some kind of nice idea? I need a long breath and practice a lot. The more you practice, the more you feel a yearning, But not anymore for the door and what's behind the door. That kind of yearning stops because you know what's behind it. It's just another empty room. So your interest drops away there. Now maybe for the first time in your life, you're not looking anymore at the door, but you start looking at yourself. That's the big difference. And you would only do that because you're disappointed in the door. So this is when people turn around. They have been disappointed by life. And trust me, I've met hundreds, maybe thousands of people in those 10 years that we've been doing this with the center. It is always people that come here because suffering makes them come here. And they look for answers. There is something in them that's restless, curious. All that is an itch that they want to scratch. They've tried many, many things in their life and it all kind of doesn't work. And then they get this idea, maybe meditation might help. And you're lucky because you found that one thing that's the direct path. Everything else is just another door. And it doesn't really matter what tradition it is. As soon as that tradition shows you to look at yourself and not running away into fancy visualizations and nice whatever, but to look at the way it is. And then to start asking skillful questions to yourself, like, is it necessary for me to be in so much pain? Could I go above it? Could I let it go? And if that is really possible, like the Buddha said, for example, it is possible to find an end of suffering. If that is true, how can I do it? You have to kind of stick around and look closely at how you make it, so that you know how you can unmake it. Like the Dalai Lama, right? He's kind of he really loves like little things of technology, like a radio, a transistor radio, or watches and stuff like this, right? He liked, I think, I'm not sure if it was the Dalai Lama, I think so. He liked to take them apart and put them back together so he understands how they work. I have a background in website design and development, so for me there is a problem-solving aspect that I find highly interesting in meditation. How do we make something appear, and if it doesn't appear the way you want to, why is that? You have to go back to the code and look, where's the problem? The same thing applies to the mind. So you suffer. Let's call that a problem. Why is that suffering there? And it's not a philosophical question. Why is it there? It's a very practical, down-to-earth question. I always find it amusing when people say, this is just like philosophical, abstract thinking. It's not at all. It's very practical. It's very much down-to-earth. Here I am. It hurts. Why does it hurt? Who is making it hurt? You can't kind of back away from that question unless you find an answer. And being passionately curious about it leads you to that answer. Not giving up. You really want to know how to end suffering. Wonderful. You're just on the right track. That's just what it takes. If you really had enough, if you're that disappointed in suffering that you really have enough, you'll do just the right work, quite automatically. As the Buddha did, he went into the forest because he just didn't really want to suffer anymore. And so he started his search, and he wouldn't stop until he found it. And he tried a lot of stuff. He almost killed himself trying to find the solution. And it takes that spirit, and now we are fortunate because we had so many great masters from the past who have made it too, who could completely go out from suffering. And there is proof. There's visual proof of people who have gone beyond suffering. They experience no discomfort or pain or suffering whatsoever. Well, probably one of the most famous ones is that Vietnamese monk who burned himself during this demonstration in Vietnam against like communism or something. It was like that. It was in the 1960s, something like that. Yeah. And you can see him sit there calmly while burning to death, not moving a muscle. That is, there is more such things, of course. There is more visual proof of people having gone beyond any form of discomfort. As I mentioned it last time, like recently, right? Luang Por Suchai in Thailand here, who burned to death in his kuti. Similar death. And what he did is he couldn't go out of his burning hut. So he sat down and meditated until he died. So this definitely shows a form of release, right? It shows like you have one of the Tibetan great masters who went to the dentist and had a whole lot of teeth pulled out. Ajahn Chah, the same thing here, without any how do you call it? Anesthetics. Yeah, nothing, zero. And he fell asleep during the treatment, kind of being so deeply relaxed on the dentist's chair while the dentist is pulling teeth. Did you fall asleep? These people are thoroughly relaxed. And that's real relaxation. It means it's relaxation no matter what. That I find aspiring. I want that. I want that kind of relaxation. One day in my life I want to be that guy that gets the fatal diagnosis of cancer and smiles genuinely from the inside out. Be totally at ease. I want to lie on my deathbed and be a happy man. Not feeling that I lose anything or leave anything behind. Being totally released from everything. That is what I want. I want to be totally at ease. No matter where I go, what happens to me, I want to be totally at ease. Then and only then I consider my work to be done. That is not the case right now. So I have work to do, and I can't fool myself. I notice when my mind contracts, when the feelings contract, when I'm not open to the truth, to reality. So what do? I relax, I let go. And what brings me there is over and over again, it is disappointment. And that's just one of three powerful facets of the practice. Being truly disappointed in the future, the past, fantasy, thoughts, feelings. I'm looking for something deeper. And that kind of keeps me on the path. I know that there is something deeper. And I'd like to encourage you to look very well at yourself. This disappointment is nothing that you can create artificially, so now I'm supposed to feel disappointed when I sit in meditation, kind of like that. No, it's not like that. You're not sitting down and supposed to feel disappointed. That would be like completely missing the mark. But look Just look at your experience and look very well. Look thoroughly. And I promise you, you will come to the same conclusion. It's like repetitive, everything going round and round in cycles, right? The word for that is actually samsara. You might have heard it before. There's a movie called Samsara. The Thais, they call it vatachak, the cycle of existence. Everything turns around again and again. Birth turns to death. Everyone loves birth. Everyone hates death. Doesn't make any sense, right? Why would you love birth and hate death? It's birth that causes death.
One thing with children, with their upsets, crying and that, there must be a lot of suffering with children.
Yes.
At a very young age.
Correct, yeah. Its suffering is inherent in our existence. It starts with birth. Suffering starts literally with birth. Not only just in our human realm like this, like being born into a human body, but with any kind of birth. Let's say an emotion comes along and you're born into it. Meaning you are identified with that emotion in that moment. You start suffering it. And you start suffering its outcomes, which are manifold. So as soon as you're born, problems start. As soon as you're born into any form, whatever form you take, you will suffer that form. If you want to stay beyond suffering, you have to stay unborn. And you have to stay with that which doesn't get born, which is the knowing quality in essence. That's what we cultivate in our meditation practice. This is the direct path to the unborn. That will take you deep into a layer of yourself that is never born, nor does it die. Anything else is always born, and it's birth and death. And with it comes old age and illness and sorrow and loss and all that kind of stuff. It comes with birth. Large scale, small scale, same thing. As above, so below. As it's in the microcosm, so in the macrocosm. It's the same laws that govern everything. And it's the same laws that govern suffering and the end of suffering. Every time, over and over again. Okay, so I think that's enough for today.